500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die.
The Phantom,
the ghost who walks,
the Phantom,
enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
G'day everyone. For those who came in late, you're listening to Expand, the Phantom podcast. My name is Dan Fraser, and tonight I'm joined by Jermaine Parker. How are you, Jermaine?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. It's been an exciting last couple of days. So, yeah, looking forward to spending some more time in the Phantom.
Yep, and it has been an exciting last couple of days, but I think the excitement that we have been experiencing is just a small microcosm of the amount of excitement experienced by our, I'm going to say guest, but also, regular Chronicle Chamber contributor, Mikael Lyck. How are you, Mikael?
Hello, I'm great. It's been as you say, crazy 48 hours. It's been so nice, but not much sleep, but it's been so much love and so much things to do. Yeah, it's been crazy.
Wonderful. So just to clarify for people who may have come in late, Mikael Lyck is obviously the creator of the Phantom, the card game, which has just been released on Kickstarter in the last 48 hours, which is the time frame we've been talking about. And fair to say, it's gone great guns, Mikael. You must be just thrilled with the way that it's launched and gone.
Yeah, it's really over expectation. I mean, I really hoped and dreamed of fulfilling the the campaign at all, but doing it so quickly and then just burning through some stretch goals, it's amazing. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems people want more Phantom.
Yeah.
Yep. And reading through the comments, it seems like a lot of people have come for the game, but are staying for the Phantom, if you like.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Like lots of people also talks about how they remember him growing up and now finding back to starting to get comics from eBay and finding their old ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's probably the most pleasing thing, is that potentially we're going to get new fans out of this, or old fans back. And, for us to get our comics and continue to get our comics, we need people to buy comics. So that's what has excited me a lot, is just, it's not just the Phantom fans, it's other people that are getting on board. So it's congratulations from myself and from Chronicle Chamber. You've done a great job. You've smashed it out of the park. It's exciting watching it.
Yeah, and it's not only the comic book fans, but I mean, a lot of people have only seen the movie, and they're saying maybe it's time for a new one, because it's the time range that lots of those who saw it when it was on theater were perhaps like the age I was, 15, 16 years old, and that's great nostalgia, and it's maybe it's time for a new one.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, I guess the point of tonight's podcast, or the YouTube video, if you're watching that, is to probably help some of those fans or potential fans who are coming back to the fold, or maybe picking up the Phantom for the first time, but also as a reminder for people who are long-term Phantom fans and perhaps need a bit of a reminder about some of the stories, because what we're going to do today is a bit out of kilter for us. We don't tend to review old stories. We look at reviewing the new comics as they get published, but what we want to do is review the 3 stories that the card game has been based on, the 3 decks and the 3 plots that you've created in the card game, and look particularly at those 3 stories. And it's really nice to be able to dip back into these old stories, I found, and I read these for tonight's podcast. Yeah,
definitely. I've enjoyed it. I really enjoyed getting back into the saga. We're only going to review the first part, but the year 1 saga. I really enjoyed getting into that, and I'm still kicking. That there was such a great opportunity that was missed with that one. But no, it was great fun getting stuck into them again.
So, Mikael, I might just put you on the spot a little bit and ask you. No, we'll ask you the question as we go through why you chose each story and what was it about that story that made you think it was one you wanted to use for your card game. But how about you give us some direction in terms of the order in which you'd like to talk about the stories? Because obviously we've got 3 stories: Devil's Story, Diana in the Jungle Patrol, and the 21st Phantom. So, which of those 3 stories would you like us to kick off with?
I mean, I like that order. It's the same order as I did the adventures in the game, and it's the same order I want them to be played. I think it's a good order.
Perfect. All right, perfect. Well, we'll start then with Devil's Story. Now, Devil's Story is a 1979 Team Fantomen story. So it's, what does that make it? Nearly 40 years old as a story. Over 40 years old. Goodness me. 41 years old as a story, but not... and probably fair to say the most popular of the 3 stories we're going to talk about today. Was originally written by Donne Avenell with the art by Georges Bess. It's actually been published in 14 different countries around the world, which is very popular for a Team Fantomen story. Of most relevance today, it's been published in Sweden 5 times. The first time was actually back in 1979. And sporadically over the next couple of decades, most recently published in Fantomen Krönika in 2007, issue number 6 of 2007. As far as being published in English and for Australian audiences who form a big part of this podcast audience, it was first published in 1992. So it did take a while for Jim Shepherd, who was the publisher then, to bring it into the Australian audiences. As I said, in 1992, that was issue 1013. It was also republished in 1996, which I guess only 4 years later speaks to the popularity of it. And then for the third time and most recently, and the copy that I'm going to refer to today is from the 2017 trade paperback for those who came in late, which told the story, the origin stories of lots of elements of the Phantom. And Devil's Story is the origin story of the Phantom's wolf. So it was really nice to dip back into this one. Before we hear from Mikael, Jermaine, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you thought of Devil's Story?
I think you said it very well. That it's probably the most. I reckon it's probably the most popular Team Fantomen story that's ever been created. I will go on a limb and say that. And I'm looking forward to seeing anyone, whether it's you guys or any one of our listeners who disagree with me. And you can put them on our comments on social media or whatever. But that's how highly I rate it. And yeah, I think that probably speaks of volumes. And out of probably all the stories, including Fork, I reckon it would easily fit in the top 15 of all Phantom stories.
Right. That's high praise indeed. Mikael, clearly you like it for because you've chosen it to base your story on. What was it that grabbed your attention when you first read this one?
Yeah, I mean...
And when did you first read this one?
When I first read it, I don't remember actually, but I think it could have been when the Krönika came out. And like, what did you say, 90?
2007 was in the Krönika.
Oh, no, okay, then it was earlier. Yeah, but I mean, it was way back. But it's always stuck with me. And yeah, I mean, as you say, it's been the highest praised of the Team Fantomen stories. And you also, without mention, like when Egmont did one of their tries in India to give out a comic book with Phantom, that was the first story they published.
Yeah.
And yeah, it won Best Story of the Year 4 times out of those 5 times it's been published. And the 5th time in the Krönika, it wasn't allowed to be voted on.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? That it
really
story
is.
So many times.
And when I was thinking of which story to take, I was like, first off, it's a popular story, and we know it's good since it's been awarded. But it's also like, this is when you first meet Devil, so already there, like you unlock Devil, and that's like it takes place before he gets all of the things that we know and are used to in today's Phantom, because it takes place before the 1936 story. Like,
So for those who haven't read it before, and I think most people who are listening to this probably have, but for people who are coming to this podcast and this story through the card game, the story does basically tell the tale of how the Phantom came to own or be partnered by this mountain wolf, finding him as a cub and then training him, and it tells the story, of course, about poachers, and that's how the cub comes to be an orphan, and then yes, with the training, and there's also a bit of a nice tale about Devil's parentage as well, his father Satan and that sort of thing. So as a story in itself, what did you guys think of it?
Oh, as a story, it's ripping. It's like a different story in the sense that the Phantom's not really a hero. He's more of like just a normal human being in this type of story. Like, he's lonely. He finds companionship. He doesn't really, defeat the bad guy or anything like that. So it's a different style of story. It's not like, bad guy, see bad guy, punch bad guy, win the day. But it's and that's one of the things that I like about the writer Donne Avenell, is that he puts a lot of emotion in his stories, and I really enjoyed the story. Another thing that I forgot to mention is it's probably the only Team Fantomen element that Lee Falk actually wrote into his newspaper stories. So and in speaking to Ulf Granberg when we did the podcast, he actually made mention that Lee Falk did request this story and did like the story and commented on the story. So I guess if it's good enough for Lee Falk, it's also good enough for me.
Yeah, and that's not insignificant at all. For this to be the only one that we've been able to prove demonstrably that this, I guess, law about Devil did transfer across into what many people would regard as official law with the newspaper strip. So, Mikael, I'm going to ask about the art in a moment, but just from a narrative point of view, what did you like about the narrative, and how did you transfer that narrative into the card game?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the bad guy doesn't get defeated by the Phantom, and that, I think that was a really strong moment for the Phantom, when he's like, I can see that this is a bad guy, but also he saved my life, and then he tries to see things his way, even though it's the wrong way, and then that ends up causing more problems than it would have otherwise if he would have been brought to justice or something earlier on. But the story elements, I mean, I took basically the parts of the story. The only thing I left on the cutting board is when he goes to the place of Colonel Bagshot, where he has all the trophies, and tries to reason with them, and then gets scared off, basically. That part, I just couldn't make any good game mechanics of. So I just what's it called? Imagine it didn't happen.
A little bit of editorial control.
Yeah, but I mean, I have the first part when he gets attacked and then gets saved, and then he starts training Devil, and then the wolf starts attacking the village, and then it's the showdown. And the showdown is, it's epic. The story.
It is.
The story,
It is, and it's a story that's very true to, I guess, why a lot of people fall in love with the character of the Phantom as well, because for the reasons that Jermaine has outlined before about, not just an ordinary person, not a superhero, for that coming together and that companionship as well. It's a really true story, I guess, to what we like about the character.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the artwork before. We are going to have to explicitly talk about the art for each of these stories because, of course, you have used so much of the original art from these comic books in the cards, which, you know, personally is something that I really love about the card set that you've created. I'll come to you in a moment, Mikael, but Jermaine, what are your thoughts on Georges Bess's art in this particular story?
I really like Bess's artwork. It works well in black and white, but I also thought the Frew issue it worked well in with colour. I think it's better colouring than the Indian version. But what's interesting about his style of the Phantom is it's a very sleek, you know, non-over muscular style Phantom, and I kind of like that look, and not too muscle driven and more athletic. But you know, some of the like the art is you know, some of the black work, like you know, just something as simple as that, where, you know, he's walking away from the campfire, and so there's a lot of blacks in there, and there's a lot of you know, this is on page 11 if you're looking at issue 1013. So there's a lot of use of black in that story, which is quite well, and the action shots, like there's a lot of movement in the way he's drawn it as well, which I thought's quite good as well. I'm just, yeah, I think the art's, you know, is great.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really strong lines and just a really firm commitment to the story from the artist in this, in the way he depicts the character and Devil as well. Really got an eye for animals with the amount of wolves and horses even that are right throughout this story. Yeah. Mikael, how did you go? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, if you look at the last couple of pages, that's done at dark at night time, so there's even more black than what you would normally look at. If you're on YouTube, you can see me flipping through the pages there, where you know, there's a lot of blacks and a lot of heavy lines, and it gives that real sense of the battle, of the importance of the battle, and stuff like that.
So, Mikael, as obviously you like the artwork of this, it goes without saying, I think. How did you go? What was the process like of flicking through the comic, which I'm sure you've done 1,000 times now, to choose the panels that you were going to use for the cards?
Yeah, first out, I just want to say thanks to Ivan Pedersen for this the great coloring that I used in the game. That's the same that was used for those who came in late, trade paperback. I mean, it's a great coloring. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I've read it over and over again, and I was looking at like each panel. Could this be something that I want to do? That was half of it, and half of it was looking at the mechanics and what I want to do with the story, and then find a picture that visualized that. So it would be it was on both ways. And I mean, I've done some small editing work. As you might know, I removed some speech bubbles, and then I had to recreate how I think it would look under those. And also sometimes the angle was a bit wrong because some important thing would be cut out, so I have moved some elements, but still tried to keep it as close as possible to the original comic book paints.
So did you do all that in Photoshop yourself, or did you have a guy that did it for you?
The editing I did, but I had a guy who made it look crisp, and that made it look better, if you say like that. I did the actual like removing of stuff, or he did also. We did both together, depending on the page, I guess. Yeah, but Dayan, who has helped me with like all the art of the card layout, he also helped out with removing stuff.
Yeah.
But also the most important thing he did is make it look perfect, good for print. So it hides up the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
And that was
All right.
even more in the other ones. Yeah, sorry. It was even more in the other stories because they didn't have as good originals.
Yes. So I was going to say, and I'm glad you gave the shout out to Ivan Pedersen, because I was going to ask about which version you had used. Did you find that the being able to scan being able to scan the pages or use the pages from the trade paperback was the best of the 3 stories that you had available?
Yeah, definitely. That was least things to fix if you compare to the other ones.
Sure.
Yeah, let's take it when we come to that.
Yes, fair enough. All right. I don't want to labour on any of these stories. We know Devil's Story is an absolute classic, and Jermaine's been really clear about where he regards it in the pantheon of fandom stories.
Well, can any of you think of a Team Fantomen story that rates higher than this? I put it out there.
Look, not off the top of my head. I haven't put any thought
notice.
into it either.
There's very short notice.
60 years of stories to troll back over and think about, but no, not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know. I have a real love for the retelling they did of the first Phantom. That's also super classic.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll have to look that one up and make a comparison. But it could be an interesting social media question to throw out there, Jermaine.
Yeah, we might have to do that alongside this podcast. But anyway, we can move on. I just wanted to see if anyone had anything they wanted to add to that comment.
No, not at this stage. So any other commentary on Devil's Story, or do we move on?
Can move on.
All right. Okay. Cool. So the second story, and I guess the second deck that you'll play through in the card game, the second story that we're going to talk about today is called Diana and the Jungle Patrol, and there's the front cover of it as it was published by Frew in Australia just a couple of years ago. It was written in 1973, which makes it the oldest of the 3 stories that you've chosen here, Mikael. It was written by Team Fantomen, by Magnus Knutsson was the author. Now, we interviewed Magnus for a Chronicle Chamber podcast about a year ago, actually. Podcast episode number 119, if you want to go back and look that one up. And we do discuss this story with Magnus in that conversation. And the art for Diana and the Jungle Patrol was by Jaime Vallvé. It's almost exclusively been published in Scandinavia. When you go back and look at the publishing history, it's Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark are the 4 countries where it has been published a couple of times. It's only been published outside of those 4 countries once, and that is, this issue that I'm holding, and that's the Frew issue number 1804, published in 2018. So way less widespread and has had far less reach than Devil's Story, but is an interesting story nonetheless. I really enjoyed reading through it again tonight for the purpose of this. Obviously, we reviewed this as in a Comics and News podcast a couple of years ago, I suppose. But it was really fun to go back and read over it again. I might throw to you first, Mikael, this time in terms of your chat about the story, I guess, of Diana and the Jungle Patrol. That narrative plot of having a $100 bet as to whether she or her male friend, are going to get into the army first or be in a battle first in the army, and then for whatever reason following through on it, and Diana joining the Jungle Patrol to prove her chops as a soldier, I suppose. Obviously, again, you've enjoyed the story. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in an earlier podcast. I had a really hard time finding good stories where Diana is in the foreground and takes most of the action. And this one, Phantom is really a side note. This is all about her and her accomplishments, and I really enjoyed the story, and she really does remarkable things, and I always seen Diana as a strong, independent woman who can do pretty much whatever she sets her minds to. And it might be a bit dated in some of the things that are said and done in this, but I really enjoyed the story. As I said, if I go to the art as well, the problem I had was that before I got a nice cover from Henrik Sahlström, I was trying to do a cover for the small boxes, as I shown you in the last podcast. I was on 151, right? Or was it earlier 150? This is the best cover depicting the story, and that's still like a big phantom head in the background and stuff. So I'm really glad I got this great cover from Henrik Sahlström. Well, but she's really kicking ass with her martial arts skills, and what did you think?
I found it interesting in listening to the reason why you chose this story, because it was one of the few stories where where Diana takes center stage, and it's a brilliant point that you raise, and it's probably not the best time to discuss it now, but it's something that's worth exploring, where a lot of the secondary characters don't tend to have stories about them in a sense. It's always the Phantom and then the other characters. So I enjoyed the story as a. I think I probably enjoyed the story more as a father of daughters than I probably would before, because as a father of daughters, you realise that life's a little bit different for a girl than what it is for a bloke. And surprise, surprise, I've been a bloke all my life. So you're looking for, whether it's sports stars or strong women or heroes or whatever, to be able to, I guess, become a good role model for your daughters. And while my daughters haven't read this story, it was like Diana, like you said, Diana is a strong woman. She's a strong-willed, independent woman who could quite easily be a superhero in her own right. And it's good to have this story because it portrays Diana as, I think, she should always be portrayed, and as she was portrayed in the early days, and that is someone who, in a lot of ways, can be seen as almost an equal to the Phantom. She's an Olympic diver. She's, the first Phantom strip that we ever see is Diana beating up on a male in a boxing play fight type of thing. She's an explorer. She's done hunting. She's done all these type of things, and she is a trailblazer. And she was kicking butt before Wonder Woman, before Supergirl, and stuff like that. And I think that this story does help remind us that Diana is that type of person, and she's not just a stay-at-home mum who's looking after the kids.
I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it really does capture the spirit of Diana that Lee Falk established. I take your point. It's interesting, the dating of it. Like 1973 is, what was it, 47 years ago.
It's even older than you, mate.
Even older than me. There you go. It must be an old comic.
Sorry, mate.
It's your go-to. It's interesting in the sense to see what they, the way that, because we know that Sweden was more progressive than a lot of the rest of the world, and the Scandinavian countries were, and for them to produce a story like this, it's openly women's lib. It's openly of the times of the 1970s and the women's lib movement, the second wave there that was coming through. And so it's really good to, from a history teacher's perspective, I suppose, to dip back into what the social society was like at the time. There's still some elements, as you said there, Mikael, that do date it, and I really, you've got to question why Diana needs to strip down to answer some psychological questions as part of the interview for the, why she's just standing there in her jocks. But anyway, I guess that's the artist's prerogative, and still speaks to, I guess, a little bit of the style of the times. But by and large, it is very much and again, deliberately and explicitly women's led type story. But I think it does exactly what Jermaine has pointed out there about really highlighting how Diana is this independent woman. And I guess in that sense, the perfect choice for your card game, where the point of this deck is to introduce her as a character in the co-op and give her that equal place and that equal footing with the Phantom character.
Yeah, exactly. She has equal footing. I would say the decks are pretty much as good. A lot of people enjoy playing the Diana deck more because it has a bit more strategy, I would say, than the Phantom deck.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So I guess the chicken and the egg argument, did you read the story and like it and decide you want to put it in a card game, or were you creating a card game and you needed a good Diana story and you went back and found this one?
I would say the other part. I was reading through all the Diana front runner stories, and this was the best of them, in my opinion.
So what were some of the others that you were potentially looking at that featured Diana from a strong point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I read through all of them that has Diana in the name. And I read through the ones in the Diana Chronicles. And yeah, probably 10 or 20 more stories.
So Diana, when you say Diana Chronicles, what's that? Is that like...
It's a special issue of the Fantomen Krönika.
Okay.
They have like one special issue with the devil, with all the big devil stories, and they also have an issue with Diana and all the biggest Diana stories.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, actually. And it's very helpful for you because I guess it probably meant you could read probably about 80% of all the good stories in one hit without having to hunt through all your back issues.
Yeah, but I mean, one that I was seriously considering is if you continue on the year one, there's a story that's called The Courier, and that's also quite a heavy Diana story.
Yeah.
So that was the closest one, I would say. Yeah,
I remember that one. That's when she's framed for, was it the money that was smuggled out of, was it Cuba or somewhere like that?
Yeah. I'm not sure which country it was, but I know they put it in her bag in the airport. And
yeah. And then we would have gone with the year one saga as well. Yeah, I think this one. I like this one better.
Yeah, and I think I could still do Courier later.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I reckon you could almost do and we'll talk about that, in a second, but you can almost do the 21st Phantom year one as it should have been. We can maybe come up with a proper storyline that we could be proud of.
I do want to come to that in a moment when we talk about the 21st Phantom, but just to finish off our chat about Diana and the Jungle Patrol and the use of that in the card game, once again about the art, Vallvé's art in this case, there are lots of really cool Diana images in this one. It must have been a bit of a fun to go through and choose the ones that you're going to have for the cards. Yes,
I agree. But as I started talking about in the last, the best issue I have with color is from '93, and the coloring back then isn't as great as the other ones. So I had a lot of more work, or rather, Diana had a lot more work cleaning up all the images to make them look as good as they do in the game. Because, I mean, the art is great, painted, but the quality of the paper is not as good as the 2004 issue or the 2019 comic book.
And I think that speaks to, the credit that we need to give you, Mikael, in creating this game is because you didn't have access to the original artwork or the original scans. You're working off what you said, 1993. So you're working off a 25-year-old comic book that I assume you've scanned in and then have put that labour of love into tidying up the images, getting rid of the speech balloons, making it as good as possible. And we've seen in the Kickstarter campaign some of the quality of those cards. That's a lot of work for you to have done over the past couple of years before you even went to launch this. So, you've certainly got some, got some skin in the game in terms of having this card game funded now.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent many hours looking at these images in Photoshop. And I also, did this one is a specific one because I wanted her to have 3 martial art things, 1 hit and 1 kick and 1 throw, and finding her throwing and kicking, that was easier, but this is the only hit one I see, and she's using a strange technique to hit the guy, but so actually the advanced one is this image, but we changed the color so it looks cooler.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see that the way you've been able to use the different panels and to change up the panels a little bit to use them in multiple ways as well. Cool. All right. So Diana and the Jungle Patrol, a really good story that probably not enough people have read because it just hasn't had the been published anywhere near as widely as some of the other stories. So even if you haven't read this before, look, if you are listening to this and you don't have a copy of the comic, as I say, issue 1804, if you want to go to eBay or even Frew's website now, would still sell this comic. So you'd be able to pick yourself up a fresh mint version of that as well. So you can read that story before you go along to play the game.
Yeah, and I picked up both that and the 21st Phantom from the Frew store because I wanted the English text so I could write in. I didn't have to translate everything that's been said in the stories.
Very good. So the 21st Phantom, and there's been a couple of potential segue moments, but that's a really good one. You've actually held it up to camera, and we've talked about the 21st Phantom. So that is issue number 1390. I'm a bit old school, Mikael. I didn't get it off the website. You can see there my newsagent sticker from when I was buying this straight off the newspaper shelf before I got anywhere near serious about thinking I was actually a collector. I was just buying comics to read at the time. I didn't think of myself as someone who is into it, as it turns out I am at that stage. So 21st Phantom is the most modern of the stories that we're talking about or that you've used in the game. This one is from 2004. Once again, it's a Team Fantomen story, and I'm going to ask you a question about that element in a moment. But from 2004, this one's written by Clay Murthy, who after Lee Falk is the most prolific Phantom author, published Phantom author in the world, and has got art by Paul Ryan, who not only drew for Team Fantomen but also spent time as the newspaper strip artist as well. This was first published in Sweden in 2004, of course, as well as across the rest of Finland and Norway and Scandinavia in general through 2004. And it was also picked up very quickly by Australia, also being published in 2004 in issue 1390, as we've said. Great to hear that copies of this are still available on the Frew website, though, if you go and search for it. So pleased to hear you were able to pick that one up there. So it basically tells the story, if I do a quick plot summary, tells the story of the 21st Phantom finding out that his dad is mortally wounded, making the trip back to the Skull Cave, burying his father, visiting his mother's grave, and we hear some of the doubts that he has about taking on the mantle as this generational hero, but then being compelled into basically his first adventure, and it's the first adventure that the 21st Phantom goes on. And that then tells that story. So a really interesting story for you to have chosen again, Mikael. I guess before we get your insights, Jermaine, what did you think about this story that's called The 21st Phantom? And I guess afterwards we'll explore a little bit about this year one concept.
Yeah, when it first came out, 2004, so it would have been back in the forum days, the Phantom forum days. I really enjoyed it. I loved the idea of seeing the 21st Phantom, which is our Phantom, the Phantom that we've all grown up on. We've always seen him as an assured character, you know, comfortable in his own skin. To be honest, not much self-doubt in any of the stories we've ever read. So there was that element, which was, in a sense, making him more human. But it was a cool concept, and I was really excited by it at the time. When it comes to the story, I've always liked Paul Ryan's art. You know, I've had the pleasure of meeting him, and he was a great guy, one of the real nice people. You know, this story, it's got the whole swearing of the oath, which is one of the most powerful things about the Phantom. It's got, you know, the establishment of the law, like from the generation to generation. The ritual, you know, then we kind of even get a little bit of the lore, which about the Sixth Phantom, about the Jungle Patrol, and you know, and stuff like that. So it's a real good story in a sense for fans to kind of jump into, because they get a good crash course of the Phantom. But you know, like the story's nothing flash in the sense that there's nothing super special about it, but the way it's all set up and the different elements come together in the concept of the year one overall is what probably makes this story, in my opinion.
Mikael, what you would have read this at the time, I suppose, when it first came out in 2004?
Yeah, finally a story that was written while we were alive.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say exactly what your main said, but I agree with almost everything. But I mean, I really enjoy, even though I did not only enjoy the concept, I actually enjoyed the year one stories, almost all of them. And I thought, if I go over to why I chose it for the game, I thought that was a great way to introduce people to the character and to the stories, and also, since you're unlocking everything, why not do it chronologically as he is doing it?
Yeah,
so it's like
that's a good point.
He gets the ring,
Yeah.
and he swears the oath, and then you also get to do that in the game.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about, I guess, your game, tying the story with the game, is that you're, in a sense, becoming the Phantom. You're building yourself as the Phantom, and that's what this whole story is all about. Is that it is, you know, a boy, you know, a 21-year-old young man becoming the Phantom, who's, you know, got 450 odd years of legacy to you know, to live up to, which is quite daunting when you think about it. You know, it's hard enough for us to start a new job or you know, or something like that, to step up, you know, whether it's a job promotion or something like that. This guy is, you know, going into the family business for 450 years before.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, look, I really enjoyed it as a story as well, and I don't particularly remember enjoying it at the time. I don't remember hating it. Didn't really stick with me in any great way, to be honest, at the time. Rereading it over the weekend, I've really quite enjoyed it. There's a couple of little things that, like, for instance, you mentioned the swearing of the oath. I've always sort of had in my head that the incoming Phantom swears the oath while the dying Phantom watches wherever possible. So there's that connection, and that didn't happen here. But other than that, Claes Matthew's done a great job in this story of tying together traditional Phantom elements, and you've already mentioned a few there, Jermaine, where he mentions the Sixth Phantom and the birth of the Jungle Patrol, as he's sort of trying to think about, well, how do I fit into this this generational, how do I fit into the generations here? I also like little things like the woman he's trying to save was bound for the slave markets of Makar, and it's the Makar slavers that are coming into the story and that he ultimately scares off. So that's a really iconic story from the 1960s, Cy Barry's first story, that lots of people would love. So Place from Earthy in this particular comic has really used the Phantom lore and the Phantom legend really well and tied it all in together.
Yeah, and then you've got the Whispering Woods, you've got the Phantom Head Peak, so there's all those type of things. You've got the fact that the Phantom gets knocked on his head, which is a fairly common, trope. But, there's the things where he, plays the different elements and, scares him and, goes and creates diversions and stuff like that. So there's all those kind of elements that are pretty cool.
Yeah, that was probably the one narrative point that I didn't like was they shoot him and go, okay, so, well, he's not dead, but we're going to let him just lay there. And then there's absolutely no evidence of any shooting injury after that, whatever reason. That's not really well explained. But anyway, that's a minor point. It's probably, and you've probably covered that, papered over those cracks really well in the card game, I imagine, Mikael.
Oh, sorry, he says he has, what's it called? Headache. Yeah, but yeah, after that page, he doesn't mention it again.
No.
So, what was your question?
It's a comic book.
Yeah.
So for those who may not be familiar, they're probably going to Fandom Wiki right now, typing in U1, going, oh, what is this U1 they're talking about? And they're not going to get any results because U1, there are no entries for U1 in Fandom Wiki. Now, we've mentioned a few times that the 21st Phantom, this story, is the first story in a series that came known as U1. Do either of you guys want to fill us in and explain to the listeners what is U1? What was that concept?
So what's interesting is in the Swedish version, I'm sure Mikael's got it there, there's actually a little blurb in the start of it. Yeah, so Mikael, just talk so listeners on the YouTube can see that. Yeah,
Mikael, we just need some audio from you so that the video will flip over to you.
Now I'm talking. I'm talking very much. Yeah. They started that with that year, and it had every story had this blurb. But they also have this, they started putting this cartoon year one at the title. Yeah, and I know there was some. Yeah, you can continue.
So in the Frew one, they've also got the year one as well. If you're looking on YouTube, you'll be able to see the panel that I'm talking about. But there was not that blurb. And so what was interesting is in the Phantom forum, which is back in the olden days before Facebook, this page here, which you see the Phantom getting injured and going to Doc Axel, there was a lot of discussion where we weren't sure whether this was the 20th Phantom that we see here or the 21st Phantom, and then he is remembering. So a lot of Australian fans were a little bit confused by this because it wasn't as clear as what was in the Swedish and the Team Fantomen issues. So year one was a concept that I think from memory was created by Frank Miller when he did, I think he did Daredevil and Batman, and I'm going to get a million messages correcting me if I've got this wrong. But basically it was a concept that they created where they got these famous heroes and they did a year one saga where basically the first year of them becoming who they were, which gives you all those elements that we talked about before where you're having the fallibilities of the character, the shortcomings of the character and stuff like that, where he's not assured of himself. So it was a great concept. It was really, really good. But in my biggest problem is that probably the first 4 or 5 stories were top notch up here, and then a lot of the middle stories were very, very average in the sense that it was almost just like another story and there was nothing really about the Phantom becoming the Phantom that we know. They were almost like, oh yeah, we had this story, so let's just quickly tweak it a little bit and add it as the year one. And the concept started off good. It started off good, and then it just died a death. And Jim Shepard was not very supportive about it in his message from the Phantom, in the Australian issue and stuff like that. So to this day, I still think it was a huge missed opportunity from Team Fantomen and also from Frew to a lesser extent, that this could have been a lot better than what it really was.
Mm. It's interesting you should lay the blame at the feet of Frew as well, because really they're only just publishing the stories that come along. I completely take your point about Jim Shepard not being super supportive, and it was interesting reading the message from the publisher on this. Perhaps this is partly where I get my my standing of Team Fantomen stories are not law, because, and I'll quote from Jim Shepard in the message from the publisher from 1390. He says, "Once again, I must stress that Ramirez's story development should not be accepted as official Phantom history. That remains the domain of Lee Falk's long chronology of the Ghost Who Walks." So he was quite open in the message from the publisher before you even read the story that this isn't a real story. So it was an interesting stance to take, and completely gives a different tone to the blurb that you showed us there before, Mikael, in what was published in the Swedish version.
Yeah, and we also had this like countdown on the cover that were counting down on when he was going to wake up from his coma. Like you see in the first page, he's in a coma.
Yep.
And that's after the year one saga. It's this when he goes around with the bullet in his head and does stupid things.
Yeah. And like it, and I understand. I don't agree with Jim Shepard, but I do understand where he's coming from. I think he was rather close-minded at that stage of his publishing, because in reading the story, I don't really see, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan, but I don't really see many elements that contradict Lee Falk.
No, and in fact, as I said before, it actually seems to have made some really strong efforts to draw on Lee Falk's mythology and to fit within what could have been possible. At the first year of the 21st Phantom taking the mantle, or having just taken the oath and the rings, has never been properly explored by Lee Falk. So I can completely understand why Ramirez and Team Fantomen should want to do that. And in this particular comic, and without going over the rest of the Year One saga, but this particular story, I think he did a good job.
Yeah. I think one day we'll have to do a Year One. Maybe when Mikael releases the next Kickstarter card game, and
no
it's
pressure
over the whole saga or something like that. Review it
then. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't go into it that much, but I just want to mention that I think it was pretty cool how they integrated like their earlier Team Fantomen stories, like the Johnny Hot Rod and even the island with the two rainbows, the folk story they integrated into the Year One. I think that was pretty clever, like how Don Rosa took everything of Uncle Scrooge when he did his books. That's almost the same. Like, we have these stories, let's try to tie them together.
Yeah, and that's one thing that whether you agree or disagree, but Team Fantomen have tried to do that, sometimes successful and sometimes unsuccessfully. And
sometimes they haven't really tried.
Generally, they have tried to merge the things and stuff like that. So, it's interestingly that Johnny Hotwire 2-part series that was actually created by Tony D. Paul, where he gets to ride a Harley, and if anyone knows Tony and his love for the bikes and stuff like that, it was one of his more favourite stories. Those two stories.
Anyway, so to get back to the way you turned the 21st Phantom story into the card game, once again, we've got to talk about the art. Paul Ryan's art in this instance. Now, which book did you scan and which images did you use for the cards this time, Mikael? And what was the process like for Paul Ryan's art?
Yeah, I mean, this is basically like it hasn't been reprinted in Sweden, so it's the original comic book. I mean, there's so, like, I think all the images are really big, so it was quite easy since it was a modern story. And yeah, this one was probably the easiest one art-wise.
Interesting.
I must say I do like the overall concept then of the game that you've got 3 different decks and 3 different artists, all of whom, you know, regular Phantom fans and readers will recognise as being iconic in their own ways and during their own eras. And I think that's going to be a really nice feel to the game as we play it. As you move from one deck or one story to the next, there'll be that change of artistry as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's fun. And I mean, like, since I took the Story of Devil from the Frew one, his costume is purple in that one, and the other ones is blue. So I think that's also good that we all get a little bit of our favorite color. And I don't see an issue in having both in the cards.
Very good.
I think cool. I think it's good in the sense that it makes it an international game by having the blue and the purple and stuff like that, because it's, you know, probably 90% of fans either see them as blue or purple. So I think that's that is good.
So that, I guess, if we're going to start talking about percentages, let's go and talk about the Kickstarter campaign at this stage. 30-odd% of your backers so far have come from Sweden, which has got to be pretty satisfying for yourself to see that there's, your compatriots are supporting you. About 20% ish from each of United States and Australia as well. I'm probably a little bit surprised with the Australian numbers in particular. You've mentioned the American numbers in a chat we've had. Are you looking to see a bigger uptake from the Australian and the American markets?
My hope is to get more, of course, but yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the numbers as they are, and I'm happily surprised that there's so many other countries except the 3, because I was thinking like this will be exclusively Americans, Australians, and Scandinavians, but I mean the UK seems quite okay, and
Germany is another one as well.
Yeah, but Germany loves games, board games and card games, so they're like the European capital of games. But I mean, I contacted some English guys, and they know who the Phantom is. They have read the comics that came out in what was it, the 90s, the Wolf comics and those, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I thought since there was so small what's it called, print run, I thought not that many had read it, but it seems like he was more popular than I thought.
There was, I know Defenders of the Earth was very popular in the UK. If you look at the first issue of the Wolf comic, it's actually got the Phantom as seen in Defenders of the Earth. So, and then there was been actually a lot of these. So there's been these Miller comics, which were from the 60s or 70s, and there's been some of these as well. So there has been Phantom comics from the UK, and he was also in a lot of like TV type of magazines as like a backup feature and stuff like that. But he's not nearly as popular as what he probably should have been.
Yeah.
So hopefully over the next three and a half weeks, you'll see a bit more of an uptake from countries around the world. But as you say, you're completely satisfied with the numbers at the moment because it funded so quickly. You know, we've locked it in. It is going to get made. Rocketed past the 3 stretch goals that were already listed on the campaign page. And I would imagine, that's probably been the biggest question that you've faced in the last 24 hours since it funded, as it became clear that it was racing up the pledge tally there. What are the next lot of stretch goals? Now, as we record this, you've just posted another couple to the page. Are you satisfied that you've got enough stretch goals up your sleeve to satisfy demand?
Yeah, I think so, because we have a few that we can pick in, but we also have a few that we're looking at production costs if we can do it, and then it would be really nice to be able to pick those as well. But yeah, first of all, I wanted the fun so I could do the game, but it's so nice to have both the loot and the achievements and the good card quality, because that's how I imagine it to get this great replayability that I think is, it wasn't needed, but yeah, it really makes the game much better.
Yeah, cool.
Can I ask about the stretch goals that you've got planned? Because those 3 stretch goals are nice, I guess, for Phantom fans and collectors, but seem like far more desirable for game players. And the things that I think part of why this is so successful is because you've appealed to the card game market, and the mechanics of the game from all of the reviews that I've heard seem to be really good. I don't have a great understanding of that. I'm a Phantom fan. As far as your stretch goals going forward, do you see them as being more to do with the game and the gameplay, or are they or are they going to offer something to the collector's market as well?
You play the game, so you have a small idea about the mechanics, right? But yeah, I guess most is like I would say the first ones. Greater quality of the cards. That's good for collectors, and also like the loot and the achievement that's new. Those cards had art that wasn't in the core game. So that's, what was it, like 23 new cards with art. Those 2 that are up right now, that's more for I would say gamers, because that gives them more option to deck build. But I heard in your comments before we're doing this, and I'm not going to talk about it on the podcast because I don't know if I can do it. But yeah, I like that idea, so I'm going to take it into consideration. And I gotten quite a lot of good ideas from the good backers that's writing the comments in the Kickstarter. There's been so much good energy there.
That was going to be my next question as well, because again, we're only 2 days in. There's over 170 comments in the Kickstarter thread there, and I know you've been excellent. You've been really responsive. So probably half of those are you answering questions from people that have asked. But how has it been fielding these suggestions? Are some of them you're going, no, I thought of that and it's not going to work, or that's so left field, it's not for me? Is there any comments where you look at it and go, gee, I hadn't thought of that, maybe I'll bring that in?
Yeah, I think I always try to be honest, and I think I'm that in the comments as well. Like there has been a few times where I said, like, I have thought of this and this is what I came up with, but if you can change my mind by any means, try to. And then in the same way, I say, like, oh wow, I haven't thought of this. This is a great idea. Like I got this idea of the achievement cards. You have this card where you should do a checkbox every time you do an achievement, and I got this suggestion that you shouldn't have things that you have to destroy by painting on it, and he gave some suggestion, and that made my gear spinning. So I'm gonna try to make it better in a way to have. There's a few different ways. It's all depending on cost, like the cheapest way, but still that could be doable without doing anything. That's instead of having a checkbox, just say which card you unlock, and then if you have already unlocked it, then I've already done this achievement, and then you don't have to print anything.
Yeah.
That would be the easy option. But I'm also looking at what would it mean to change the achievement system, but that would need some more cards.
And how does it feel? Because I'm not sure I would enjoy this, but how does it feel for you, having spent years and years on planning this game, getting it to where it is, designing all the cards, etc., and then having all of these Johnny-come-latelys pledge the game, and then feel a sense of ownership, and then be asking questions and throwing in suggestions and that sort of thing? Is that off-putting for you, or you enjoy that feedback now, or how is that?
I enjoy it. Maybe I was afraid that I would feel like that 2 years ago or something like that. But once I started play testing with people I don't know and getting like real tests and real feedback, I realized that I really enjoy talking about game mechanics and trying to improve things as much as possible. And to improve things, you need different angles to issues. And I mean, everyone who has been play testing with me, not everyone, but almost everyone have had some input. That a lot of that has come into the game to make it better in the end.
Oh, that's awesome. You have seemed really approachable and really open in your comments, and I think that the way that you're responding to people in the comments and the fact that they're coming back and you're having these conversations now, it's really responsive. And I think anyone who's a backer of this campaign is going to enjoy the ride, because the updates that we're getting and the interaction that you're having with people is really positive so far, for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, I hope everyone also remember, like, this is our first Kickstarter and our first game, so maybe we're not as professional in all our updates as many other campaigns are, but we're doing our best, and we're going to try to make this game as good as we possibly can.
Very good. All right. Well, we did say it was going to be a short podcast, and it's already longer than we thought. But the actual comments, true to form. Jermaine, is there anything else you'd like to talk about or ask Mikael before we sign off?
I heard a little story about some shaving cream or something like that. Do you want to quickly tell us about that story?
Yeah, in a weak moment before the Kickstarter launched, I told my wife that, if we fund, I will shave off my beard. But yesterday, when we funded, we realized we don't have any shaving cream or shaving gel. So she's actually out buying it. I think she's home already with it. So I guess I'll go shave after this.
Awesome.
So maybe I should take a picture for the page.
Yeah. Were there promises made that you had to stay shaved, or are you going to be able to just grow the beard straight back again?
No, I will grow it back. I mean, it's Corona time. It will grow out in no time.
Maybe
I mean, this hair really needs cutting, but
just do the whole lot.
There.
Should shave half of this side of the beard and then half of this side for your hair, and then you can hold up the comics for the picture for the title page. That would be interesting.
Pass.
that was a hard answer. Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mikael. We've really enjoyed catching up with you. We've really enjoyed chatting about the stories behind the cards and finding out a little bit more about how you chose them, why you chose them, and how you've been able to use them since. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and hopefully this is something that you'll be able to use as well to help explain to the backers how you came to this point.
Yeah.
It's always fun being welcome back I don't know why, but I like it.
Very good. Very
hope
good.
so.
Well, we're certainly going to put the obviously the links to the campaign in the show notes as well, and you should look up the Phantom the card game on Facebook if you haven't already, and follow the progress there. But obviously on via Kickstarter.com at the moment is the big one there. You can also follow what we do. We're on chroniclechamber.com. So if you have come to the podcast because of the card game, but are intrigued to hear more about the Phantom, chroniclechamber.com is the place to go for that. You can email us at chroniclechamber@gmail.com. Of course, we're also on social medias as well. We're on Facebook at thechroniclechamber.com. Just do a search for that on Facebook. We're also amongst the Phantom Collector group. We're on Twitter at chronicle_tweet, Instagram at Chronicle Chamber, YouTube, just search Chronicle Chamber. Lots of different ways that you can get in touch with us there. And if you are not subscribed and would like to hear more about all things Phantom, then you should absolutely subscribe through iTunes or Spotify or whatever is your preferred podcast player. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for your time tonight. Really enjoyed chatting about this. It's really exciting that this Phantom card game is up and going and is, I guess, locked in for production now. And just looking forward to seeing how far we can take it with the stretch goals as they come. So congratulations again, Mikael, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and congratulations as well. And if you haven't backed, jump on board and let's get some more stretch goals happening. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. Get onto the Kickstarter, and as always, happy Phantoming.
Happy Phantoming, guys.
Happy Phantoming.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die."
The Phantom,
The ghost who walks.
the Phantom,
Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds